This three-bean casserole is dumb.
Scooby-Doo-bop-biddy-bop-bop-bop. I'm so sorry, babe. I hadn't tasted him yet.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Looking forward to, you know.
Don't talk about the ingredients. I know. Yeah.
After, it's just a surprise for your mouth.
Yeah.
And this is Way of X #2. I was very impressed with the first issue, but also extremely skeptical just because of, I don't know, just the way the X-Men office has been running and the way they don't really tend to pay anything off. You know, out of all the stuff that was introduced in House of X Powers of 10, a lot of it hasn't really been touched on. We certainly got a conclusion to the Rocco original Four Horsemen stuff, but there's a lot of stuff, a lot of hanging threads just out there waiting to be explored. And I'm still skeptical that this is going to give me exactly what I'm looking for, but this is the first time I've really gotten that House of X Powers of 10 feel about a series. There's been a issue here or there from Jonathan Hickman, specifically on his X-Men title, you know, when maybe they do that Children of the Vault stuff, or when they were exploring the Destiny Mystique relationship and why they won't bring back precogs, and it's like, okay, we're about to get somewhere, and then they just kind of stop it. And this is going through with something. Unfortunately, next issue is Hellfire Gala. Like, what a just terrible time to put an event book to just halt the momentum of something really cool that I think people are going to be excited about, or at least it has you thinking. That's the most exciting thing about a comic book, and really a good comic book. And one of the things I thought that was most exciting about House of X Powers of 10 was it had you thinking, like, what does this mean? How does this all kind of fit together? As you try and see the foundation of what Jonathan Hickman was laying and what he was going to build on top of it. That's most of what I've been disappointed in. And the fact is there's a lot of not very good creators, but I've talked about that enough. But here, Simon Spurrier and Bob Quinn are doing a really good job. Specifically, Simon Spurrier exploring Krakoa and Krakoan society through the eyes of Nightcrawler and the issues that he's having. This is an excellent comic book. I would say this issue is better than the first, and I really like the first. I'm becoming less skeptical. I feel like Simon Spurrier is probably taking this somewhere that's, even if it's not exactly what I want, it's something that needs to be said and needs to be explored. I'll give this is like a 4.5-star comic. Pretty darn good art, really good writing. Highly recommend, on the verge of like a highest recommendation. This is something that if you're an X-Men fan, if you're excited about House of X Powers of 10, and you're going to read one comic book series, this is the one you should be reading. Even though I love Hellions, it doesn't feel like it's all that related to what we saw in House of X Powers of 10, other than, you know, the Mr. Sinister Chimera stuff a little bit that we're seeing. Or even I really like Wolverine. Those are just Wolverine stories. This is a different animal. And I think it's too bad that there's so many series out there, and this is probably never going to get the publicity or attention it deserves, because it's really, really good. So let's get into the comic book review, and we'll talk about the art first. I was a little bit critical last issue. I was like, why didn't they take somebody just with a different feel than kind of the artists that we've gotten in Dawn of X now and Reign of X? You know, certainly Bob Quinn fits in, but, you know, could we get something totally different? And I'm taking that back a little bit, and I think a lot of it has to do with the color artists. I think it's Java Target. My goodness, I'm going to have to look at this. Where is it? There it is. Java Tartaglia. I hope I said that right. I'm almost 99% sure I didn't. But I apologize, sir, if you watch this. But the color work does a really good job, like, setting the mood for this. And we get some really nightmarish scenes. And these aren't in the real world. These are in the psyches, in the minds of the characters that we're reading about. It's really effective. And I think we got a lot more tone just in the art, in the illustrations that we're getting, that are really fleshing the story out and what Simon Spurrier is trying to convey, like the feelings that you're supposed to have when you're reading this. You know, sometimes it takes a bit of time for an artist and even a color artist to really get the feel of what the writer's trying to convey with the story, and really get the visuals on board and really fulfilling that mission. Now let's get into the story, because this is definitely the most interesting thing. I hope this review doesn't go too long, but there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So at the end of the last issue, we had Legion and Nightcrawler having a conversation, and we pick up right there in the cemetery, and Legion's astral projection enters Nightcrawler's mind. This is really, really interesting stuff. And we get a view of the inner workings of Nightcrawler's mind at the moment. And he's on this pirate ship, and there's different versions of him trying to keep the ship up and floating and seaworthy while they're being attacked by this Kraken on this very rough sea that they're traveling on. And we have Nightcrawler down on his knees praying. In my mind, and this is the way I interpret it, I could be completely wrong. When you're looking at this stuff, he's not telling you exactly what it means, but I think we're all supposed to interpret it. This is the way I see it. Nightcrawler knows something's wrong, that they are traversing rough terrain. They're going through rough seas, and there's something just waiting to come out of the abyss and swallow them up whole. There's something not right. And he's been saying that multiple times throughout, and he's doing everything in his power. Keep the ship, and in this case, I imagine it's metaphorical of like Krakoan culture, Krakoan civilization for mutants afloat and traversing these very dangerous waters, these dangerous things that they're going through, they're experiencing right now. And that's what my interpretation of the inside of Nightcrawler's mind is. You might have a different interpretation. I would love to hear what you think this represented. Not only did it look great and it looked really cool, saying a ship full of Nightcrawlers, being attacked by a Kraken, but I think what it represented was really neat, and it's fun to think about. That's what I like. I like a comic book that challenges me. Show me something, tell me some things, and then let me come away with my own feeling about what it is that you're trying to convey to me. You don't have to spell everything out. You can let me work the details out in my mind and come away with my own personal experience. I appreciate that. I am not a toddler. I don't need training wheels on my comic book. You can let me explore the story that you're providing and come up with my own interpretations. But the biggest revelation that we have, and we've been talking about, there's something wrong with the mutants on Krakoa. They're kind of having orgies. We're seeing young mutants essentially begging to be murdered so they can be resurrected. We've got Magneto cutting people down. Before that, it was Apocalypse. We're seeing all these weird things as mutant culture, Krakoan culture, and they establish their own like societal norms on what's going on the island. And it all feels very off. You're like, what is going on here? And one of the theories I've had, and a lot of people, is when these mutants are being resurrected, Xavier imprints them, like their personality and memories and everything. He has a backup of everybody, that he's altering them and he's making them more docile or maybe more compliant to whatever structure that Charles Xavier and Magneto are trying to create. And Legion finds that there's something corrupt. There's a corruption. I believe Nightcrawler calls it a poison coin, but he pulls it out and he says, somebody's messing with your mind. And he kind of pulls out and he removes it from him. He's in his astral form. He cannot stay this way, or he's going to essentially blow up and destroy the world. He says, hey, listen, in 10 minutes, I'm going to blow up. You need to go back to Krakoa, bring some people that are smart, and come find me. I've imprinted some coordinates in your head. A favor for a favor. I just removed this from your subconscious. You got to come and help me. Nightcrawler goes back to the island. He grabs like Dr. Nemesis, Pixie. I think there's another character or two. This is nuts. They find I guess it's a disheveled orchid base out in the middle of Saudi Arabia. Obviously, they've taken a Krakoan gate. How they grew a Krakoan gate in the desert, I'll never know. But they arrive, and they find his astral projection. And there's all these scientists that are dead, and they're like fried up. And they discover that Orchis has been experimenting on Legion. I believe physically, this is the way I take it, that the only thing left of Legion anymore is his brain. Like, he has no body anymore. I guess they've cut him down into pieces or whatever, and they've just got his brain and they're using it. And he brings them into his mind because he needs them to see what's happening. And there's just complete chaos going around. There's people getting murdered left and right. There's just weird stuff. There's people hanging, and there's a lot of death and destruction. And Dr. Nemesis is looking at this, and I guess he's hearing kind of what's being described. And he comes up with a theory. Orchis has been creating like a notional reality using Legion's brain. And they're running all these simulations on how to destroy Krakoa. What can they do to kill off this emerging mutant civilization, this emerging mutant culture? And they're running all these simulations in his brain to figure out how they can destroy it. Obviously, that has something to do with what was implanted in Nightcrawler's brain that was just discovered. And as they're going through, there's a mantra that's kind of being said at the end, and it's me before we, me before we, me before we. The way I take this is what Orchis discovered is the way that you could kill Krakoa the fastest is you have to take away like the moral compass. And that's probably why we have all these massive orgies and people kind of lining up to get murdered and doing all these weird things on the island, all these things that seem sinister, that seem so against the Charles Xavier that we know. The things that we're seeing Nightcrawler witness, and then in the last issue he says, I can find no fault in the emerging mutant culture. And you're sitting there like, is this the Nightcrawler that I know? You would find lots of faults in here. He's got people worshiping false idols. He's got people making other people murder them. He's witnessing all these crazy things. And you can see it's because he had been corrupted. There was that poison coin, as he called it, in his head. And it likely has to do with what we're seeing right here, where Orchis understood that the easiest way to destroy Krakoa was to poison the emerging culture, poison the people into putting me before we, putting themselves before the nation state, I guess. This is kind of the way I took it. Simon Spurrier is absolutely on fire in this comic book. This is cool. When you got done with House of X Powers of 10, this isn't what I knew I wanted to read, but if this was the first thing I was reading afterwards, it would have been just as exciting as what we were getting before. These are the kind of ideas that really challenge a reader and explore parts of this Marvel universe or this X-Men universe that have never really been seen before. And it really, just thinking about Orchis doing this, what they've done to Legion, cutting him into pieces. He's only a brain anymore. Just really disgusting stuff. What lengths will these people not go to destroy these mutants? And it certainly paints them much less as villains as being tampered with. What we're witnessing really isn't the way the mutant culture would have developed without tampering from the outside as people try to kind of take them down, poison this emerging nation, before it can really establish itself as this big world power. Tell me your thoughts on this as well. What did I miss here? This is all really cool. You cannot get everything that's being said in one or two readings of this comic. Like, this is something that you have to read 3 or 4 times. And every time you're probably going to find something different or come away with a different interpretation or feeling about something you already knew before. Because there's so many good things. Like, you just don't get good comics like this all that often. And what we get this one scene, and I think this was supposed to be like a dramatic event. You remember I think it was House of X number 4? I think it's House of X number 4, where you get that really dramatic scene with Wolverine and Nightcrawler. And Nightcrawler says, I'll see you on the other side, brother. Something to that effect. And you think he's talking about I'll see you in heaven. You find out the next issue, what he was talking about was I'll see you in Krakoa when we're resurrected. So this favor for a favor, now that they have this information, he wants Nightcrawler to end him so he can be resurrected. Dr. Nemesis has this gun, and Nightcrawler's like, no, I got to do it. And then he shoots him. I think this is supposed to be really hard for Nightcrawler, but he knows he's going to be resurrected. That's one of the things when you take the bite away from death, or the consequences of death away from the story of the universe. Something like this that would probably should be really impactful or hard. It's like, well, why is he even fretting here? He's just going to come back. So I think this probably would have been more impactful, without resurrection. But then again, if he killed him without resurrection, he wouldn't come back. This obviously isn't like a Simon Spurrier issue. He's doing what he can with the the scenario and the situation that he has, and he's using it to his fullest advantage. But I don't think this was probably as impactful as he originally meant it to be. So when he gets reborn, Charles is having a very difficult time. It feels like he didn't even want to resurrect him, and he does not want to implant his personality and memories. But it turns out it's not up to Charles Xavier, because Legion is so powerful that he was actually able to re-upload himself and get himself back to normal during the resurrection process. He actually didn't need his father. And his father kind of starts to explain things. Immediately, Magneto is telling him, we've got this, Omega 11 mutant that we're interested in, that we think is out there. Can you help us? And he's like, no. And after that, we get this really cool revelation. And this is something else that we're all going to have to interpret ourselves. And this is what he says to Magneto and Charles. There are secrets here, secrets and shadows. I can smell the first on both of you. And the second seems to me Kurt's the only one even looking, saying, you two are keeping secrets, and there's something wrong here. There's something creeping in the shadows, i.e. the Patchwork Man, or I think it's Patchwork Man. And Kurt's the only one that knows to look for it. And then he says about Kurt, tell you this, I've been in his head. It's chock bloody full of questions, but he's not pretending he's got the answers. That I trust. Charles and Magneto think they're in control. They think that they're controlling everything, that everything is going ahead as planned. Anytime you think you're fully in control of anything, let alone an entire population of people, you're fooling yourself. But they're so confident that they don't even realize they should be looking for all these answers. Certainly, they're like, yes, the Patchwork Man is out there, and we'll send Nightcrawler after him. And they just assumed that it was Legion the whole time. Here's a spoiler. It's not Legion. But in his mind, because Nightcrawler knows that he's not in control, he's on that ship that he's trying to traverse these rough seas where he's got this monster coming out of the abyss, the Krakoan, this unknown entity, coming after him, but he's still trying to right the ship, but he's also praying to God for safe passage, for deliverance from this storm and this thing that he's going on. He trusts that. Nightcrawler knows that something's wrong, but he knows he has to do the right thing and get to the bottom of it. I thought that was a cool revelation, kind of about the state of mind of Charles and Magneto, and why they're fooling themselves, and why really Nightcrawler, if you're wanting to look at Krakoa for what it really is, you need to look at it through Nightcrawler's eyes, and the way that he's been perceiving the island probably is the most true interpretation, even more so than Wolverine, who's certainly himself very skeptical of a lot of the things that are going on in Krakoa. I thought that was really interesting. The last bit is the person that implanted that poison coin in Nightcrawler's head, and assuming everyone else's head. That's why they're all being visited by this Patchwork Man. That's why they're all puking and having all these nightmares, because he's visiting them and he's corrupting them. He's kind of poisoning their minds. And it's not Legion, although it is a character somewhat sired by Charles Xavier. It's actually Onslaught, who's essentially the byproduct of parts of Magneto and Charles Xavier's conscience. How Orchis is using Onslaught to attack the island and bring down the morality and change the fundamentals or the development of Krakoan culture and society, I'm not sure yet, but that's certainly implied. Apparently it's not Charles Xavier messing with the mutants. It's actually Onslaught. Onslaught's a weird character. It's not like Charles Xavier sired that character. It's the manifestation of his and Magneto's subconscious, like an emerging and becoming its own entity. So very interesting stuff what Simon Spurrier is going to do with Onslaught, but that is the Patchwork Man. That is the boogeyman that's been visiting these the mutants on Krakoa, and apparently he's been poisoning their minds. At least that's the way I took it. If you guys have a different interpretation, I would love to hear it. There's so many things going on in this comic, and there's probably 100 things that I missed. So I hope we all talk about this, because this is a kind of topic that absolutely needs to be talked about. These are the kind of comics that need to be coming out and get people interested. If this had come out in Dawn of X, like Wave 1 or whatever, this would have been the standout title. It would be doing really well. Unfortunately, I do think this is going to be kind of lost in the crowd. There are too many X-Men titles. But this is the one that deserves attention. This is the one that's asking the questions that we all wanted answered. This is the one that's exploring things that deserve attention. And I'm very impressed with what Simon Spurrier is doing with Way of X. I'm still completely convinced that he will subvert my expectations, pull the rug out from underneath me, and I'm going to be pissed at the end. But at this point, I can only review the comic and base it on what I've seen. And this is excellent. This is the most exciting X-Men, stories churning out of House of X Powers of 10 like that are kind of in that vein. These are the kind of comics that make you think, that change your interpretation of what's going on in Krakoa and what things are happening and who's being manipulated and who's doing it. And are the mutants totally villains, or are they being used in some ways? I don't think I probably got all of this right. These are just my interpretations in this moment. But I think I probably got a lot of it right. And I think, just the mystery of it all is going to keep me coming back. I hope you guys enjoy this one as well. But if you're going to read an X-Men series because you like House of X Powers of 10, you should be reading this one. This one's really good. Simon Spurrier knocks it out of the park. The art from Bob Quinn takes it up a notch. The colors by Java really enhanced it this time. The tone's better. It's just really, really good execution, near flawless. Really good comic book. I'll see y'all tomorrow when I review Fantastic Four Life Story.